And there we go. We're in. Hey, folks, it's Friday night, September 4th, and my name is John Peasy. Welcome to Peasy Plus One. Guess what? I'm very excited, and I'll tell you why I'm excited. I don't usually work on Friday nights doing this online. I'm usually out doing gigs, and it's rare for me to be here on a Friday. So it's exciting to see who comes in on a Friday night. Really cool. And tonight I'm excited because the gentleman that we have coming on knows everything about the Bronx. And I was brought up as a Brooklyn kid. And I think Brooklyn is kind of like the Bronx. We'll find out in just a few minutes. So let's move on. And thank you all for coming out. Feel free to ask any questions too. I am not a connoisseur of the Bronx, but I am a kind of Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst, Borough Park, Brooklyn. And with that away, I'm going to bring on the man of the hour tonight. And this gentleman has been traveling around for a while, and he was not performing, but actually giving out lectures on the Bronx. And he's the owner of a magazine in the Bronx called Back in the Bronx. So the gentleman's name is Steve Samtur, and he's a graduate of Clinton High School from 1961. He publishes the Back in the Bronx magazine, and he maintains a website for that. And he's the owner and publisher of this for 27 years, of Back in the Bronx mag. And he's going to tell us a little bit about the way it was in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So some of it's a little bit before my time, and some of it's not. So with that away, let's bring him on in. Please welcome a very interesting man, Mr. Steve Samtur.
Hey, how are you?
Hey now, how are you?
What do you call a Bronxite who marries a Brooklynite?
What do you call it?
An interborough marriage.
I like it.
That's what I bring in Brooklyn now, and we'll talk a little bit about Brooklyn and connect it to the Bronx. But there is a connection.
Steve, I know a lot of people are going to probably before we even get into this whole thing. I don't know if people realize where you've been and what you've done with this. First of all, just at the very beginning of all of this, you're the owner and publisher for 27 years at Back in the Bronx magazine. How did this all begin for you?
Well, it turned out that the inspiration was my wife of 50 plus years. About 40 plus years ago, she started a magazine called Refundable Bundle. And she became known as the original coupon queen. And her magazine was so successful at one time, believe it or not, she had 410,000 monthly subscribers. So about 15 years into her magazine, I said, you know what? If she can do a magazine, I can do a magazine. And that was the inspiration for it. The problem was twofold. I would have to get stories that people can present to me so I can publish it. And I'd have to find out where these Bronx people were. In 1992, there was the ability to gather names and addresses of people who lived in the Bronx, so that if you were 18 and a male, you had to register for the draft, and this was public information. So I was able to gather 250,000 names of Bronxites who registered for the draft, let's say in 1955 to 1970. And so I took those 250,000 and I gave it to a computer guy who had a database of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York. And he threw it through his database and it came up with 90,000. So instantly I had 90,000 former Bronxites. And of course, if they married Bronxites, that could be another 90,000. That was the start. Today, if I had to start a magazine, I couldn't do it because public information is not available.
It's amazing, though, when you say a database, because that database in 1992 was probably on those big floppy 5 1/4 inch floppy disks and stuff, right? Because I remember back in the 90s, I had databases too, and it was much more. It's antiquated now, but back then
I had to write them in. No floppies or anything. I took 250,000 names and addresses. I'm sorry, names and date of births. And that's all. But I had to do it manually, so it was an effort to do that. But it worked out because we were able to get 80 to 90,000 hits on 250,000. So it worked out well.
Let me just acknowledge a few people that are here in the chat just real quickly. My friend here, Charlie Fish, he said, I grew up in the Bronx. I reached out to a bunch of old friends. Hopefully they are watching. Thank you, Charlie. And Brian says he has no life. He's here anyway. And also, actually, Charlie says he graduated from DeWitt Clinton. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, that was an all-boys school in the 40s, 50s, 60s, up through the 80s. And it was a tough school. The motto was, if you don't win the game, make sure you win the fight.
I get you. Happy Friday, too, from Cocoa Beach. Thank you, Mark Ward. And also a quick question. Did Steve play any sports at Clinton?
Yes, softball. I was on the junior and senior softball team. Never played baseball.
Now, Steve, I also understand that I know this for a fact that you, to your credit, that you've co-authored 3 books. I think one is called The Bronx, Lost and Found and Remembered. The other one is Then and Now, The Bronx. And the other one is, the third one, I believe, is The Bronx, Belmont, and Arthur Avenue, right?
Right.
Tell us, that takes a lot of time to create, books.
Yeah, the Lost, Found, and Remembered is a coffee table book, 400 pages with probably 250 to 300 wonderful pictures of the Bronx in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, with sections related to those pictures. So eating out in the Bronx, Orchard Beach, Yankee Stadium, the Paradise Theater. And so it's a great coffee table book, The Bronx Then and Now. I take about 250 pictures of the Bronx 60 years ago. I take the pictures as they are today, and I show the difference. And that's a lot of fun. A lot of those pictures are in color. And I go back to Belmont, Arthur Avenue, which is the Italian section of the Bronx, and we talk about Dion growing up there, the restaurants and things that you do in Belmont, Arthur Avenue. I also developed a Bronx board game, somewhat like Monopoly. I created a chess set with Bronx icons like the pawns of the Fordham Baldies. They stand there with a leather jacket and a baseball bat behind the jacket. Then I have the Rook as the Kingsbridge Armory, the Bronx Zoo. I have the Botanical Gardens. Paradise Theater is the Queen, and the Yankee Stadium is the King. So it works out nice, and I have a board that shows a token and a Spalding. So that means you stayed in the Bronx because of the Spalding, and you got out of the Bronx because of the token.
That's great. How did you find the time to do all this, or running a magazine at the same time?
Well, I had time. I devoted a lot of time, and it was my joy. So I put it together. But again, the inspiration was my wife. If it wasn't for my wife, I thinking it was so easy to put together a magazine because she did it effortlessly, I wouldn't have done it. But she was my inspiration.
I love the word inspiration. I've told this so many times to people. I don't know who told this to me years ago or where it came from, but the word inspiration means to be in spirit. And I take that as I take it as if there's like the stream of stuff going on around your head and you get inspired, but you get something from the spirit world into the body and then it comes back out through you. So when you say you're inspired by your wife, it's kind of like, it's almost got a spiritual connotation to it in my mind. Steve, you also made a disc DVD called A View from the Stoop. Am I right?
Right, and from the Stoop. It's just interview Bronx celebrities. We go through different neighborhoods. We have memories from the Stoop of these Bronx celebrities talking about their childhood in the Bronx. Do this DVD. You can buy it or you can get it free. Believe it or not, 3 hours worth of it. It's on YouTube. So just go into Back in the Bronx and you got it free. You'll really enjoy it.
That's great to know. That's great to know. So people, that's great. Now, I understand that you've been traveling for years throughout the country, doing a 90-minute PowerPoint seminar called The Bronx the Way It Was, which is really what we're talking about today. And recently, because of COVID, you've done dozens of Zoom presentations for libraries, right?
Correct.
And
apparently, libraries have a fund that they have to tap into because you can't bring in speakers. And so libraries will call me, and I would do libraries all over the country, but basically more of them are in the Florida, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, where most Bronx sites are living.
That's where we end up.
Temporarily, yeah. I was down in Florida for a month, but I had to stay an extra 3 months because of COVID. So I did a number of seminars, Zoom presentations down there.
Let me ask you a question, though. Now, I was brought up in Brooklyn and Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst, Borough Park-ish area. And, just off the cuff, though, I traveled throughout all the boroughs as a kid growing up, in Queens and Long Island. And to me, I think the Bronx and Brooklyn are synonymous in a lot of the restaurants, the behaviors, the people, the attitude, the whole New York kind of thing. Do you agree that the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens are kind of the same neighborhoods in some sense?
Yes, they had the candy store, they had the neighborhoods, the places where they congregated for shopping, the wonderful movie theaters. We had the Paradise, which you'll see. You had the Brooklyn King, I believe, and the Paradise held 4,000. Brooklyn King probably held at least 3,000, and it was similar. You can't say the same about Manhattan, Staten Island, or Queens. It just wasn't the same type. You didn't have the stoop. You didn't have the schoolyards where you would congregate. It was a whole different world.
You're right. And you know something? I remember as a kid, which was it brings up beautiful memories for me. I remember playing stoop ball. We used to get a pinky ball. It was called a pinky. And it was, I don't know, it used to cost like a dime or a nickel or something. And I remember going around the block to my friend's Carmine's house, and we would sit there, and there was like 5 or 6 steps on that stoop, and you'd throw the ball, and it would have to hit there once, hit the floor, and come back to you. And if you hit the top, actually, I guess the rim of the stoop, you got 50 points, 10 points, 20. It was almost like, and I remember playing stoop ball for hours with my friends and carving your girlfriend's initials in a tree and eating pumpkin seeds and like all these things that were just a beautiful memory of growing up in Brooklyn as a kid.
You probably remember Johnny on the Pony. Was that before your time?
What was Johnny on the Pony?
Bed down, attached to one another, and the idea was to run and jump over to the front of the line so that you could land at the front, and then your teammates would continue to jump until the pony dropped. And there was a heavy guy usually, supporting the 4 or 5 people who are bending down, making like a pony. Great. You can play that.
It's funny you mentioned this, because when I was a kid, we played something. It was called, I think it was called San Severino or San Severino or something like. It was another name, and it was the same thing. It was the same thing. You'd run. It was buck. How many fingers do I have up?
Buck was an old one, right? Yes. And I don't know San Severino or whatever. I never heard of that, but
it was buck and chicken fights. Do you remember chicken fights?
Which one?
Chicken fights.
No.
So get another kid would get up on your shoulders, and I'd hold his legs, and he'd hold you on your shoulders, and each person would be fighting on top of each other.
I do remember that. Yes, you do. It's only been 65 years, so I forgot a few things, but yes, I remember that.
And then there were kings. We used to play kings. With a pinky ball, we used to play kings against the wall. We make a square box. There's 2 people and play, and you hit the. It's kind
captain. You would play captain there. There were so many games that one would play. Stick ball was a big thing in the schoolyard. All you needed is a stick ball, a broom, and a Spalding, and you were good to go.
Great. And also, what about bottle caps?
Bottle cap, you would put your crayons. You would melt your crayons there. Or you play, if you're really an old timer, chestnuts. You would get horseshoe chestnuts, and you would actually try to break the other person's chestnut. And every time you won, you got a point. And there were some people who had these chestnuts for years, and they would oil them, so they would become so hard that it was amazing.
I don't remember this. I don't remember the chestnut game.
We didn't have anything else but inventiveness, and that's why a lot of people who grew up in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they were very successful. They were intelligent. We didn't know they were intelligent because we were there with 30 or 40 others, and we just thought they were like us. But invariably, some of them were astronauts, architects, doctors, lawyers, and dentists and teachers. And what happens? The high tide raises all ships. Well, in this particular case, if you were low, you would be raised up because of these brilliant people. And we didn't know they were brilliant. We just knew they were friends. They were interesting, and we just hung out with them.
Quick question here from the side. And by the way, somebody wrote there that was called Penny Pinsky. Pensy Pinsky. But one guy asked, Charlie asked, where did you grow up, Steve, in the Bronx exactly? West
Tremont, University Avenue, near the Park Plaza PS 82, McCombs Road.
And Bob Grant said Steve invented most of the games.
I know Bob.
You know Bob? Okay.
Bob's a big contributor to the magazine. Yeah.
Bob. Is that Bob with 1 O or 2? That's a joke. So the other thing was, I just want to move along. We haven't even gotten into this yet. There's so much you could talk about with this stuff. I even have a trailer that I could show a few minutes of you in a few minutes if you like. But What about the facts of the Bronx? Bronx facts.
Let me go over them quickly. We will move as quickly as I can.
Okay.
The only borough connected to the mainland. It comprises about 41 square miles, about the size of Rome, Paris, or San Francisco. It is by far the hilliest, steepest borough. It has 65 step streets. When you consider all 5 boroughs have 105 step streets, the Bronx is pretty steep. If you remember the movie The Joker, the trailer, he was on a step street that went from Jerome Avenue up to Shakespeare Avenue in High Bridge, and we'll show some pictures of that later on. At one time in the 40s, the Bronx had 600,000 Jews, more Jews than was in Israel.
Really?
But there's not one Jewish cemetery in the Bronx, so go figure. It was called the Bronx because Jonas Bronk, B-R-O-N-C-K, had a large swath of land with a waterway behind it. And people were going to the waterway, the Bronx River. And so they were going to the Bronx. B-R-O-N-C-K became B-R-O-N-X. And that's why we call it the Bronx. And when we were growing up in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it had 1.5 million people, the same number of people as we have in the Bronx today.
That's amazing. So the Bronx it was Jonas Bronk who owned this land, and then they were going to the river to see the Bronx.
Right, the Bronx River. And that's why we call it the Bronx.
And why do you think there wasn't a Jewish cemetery more than in?
It's a good question. I asked a number of people. I don't know. Maybe because people in the 50s and 60s may have moved out of the Bronx or started to move out of the Bronx, and there were cemeteries in Brooklyn or in Westchester or Rockland County, but there's not one cemetery. And the Bronx, you know, has a lot of land, more grassland than any borough. So there was enough land in the Bronx, it still is, but no Jewish cemeteries.
That's fascinating. And you see, who would know this kind of stuff? I give you kudos on that. That's crazy knowledge. That's crazy knowledge. Who would even know that? So, and one other quick point. The immigration of the Jewish community come at 600,000 Jewish folks, more than in Israel. When did that immigration come in, and how?
In the 40s, there were 600,000, give or take, and then slowly it increased. But the Bronx Jewish population increased when the IRT on the Woodlawn Jerome Avenue line or the 3rd Avenue line started to be built at the early turn of the 20th century. And so apartment buildings were built along the tracks of these elevated trains. And then the IND, the underground train that runs underneath the concourse, was built. And so it got you to Manhattan easily. And as a result, a lot of Jewish people came to the Bronx, and they knew it was only a 25-minute train trip from the Bronx to Manhattan, and it was convenient.
It's fast. That's fascinating. It really is. It's fascinating. Who would even know? I mean, this is not something I would even think about. This is like watching a biography about land space. Now, what about the Grand Concourse, which I have some pictures here of it, and
I will go over that because I have a lot of great pictures to show.
Okay, let me bring up a couple of these pictures and show what we're speaking about. So, tell us.
The Grand Concourse opened in 1909.
I'm going to show you the first. I have several pictures of the Grand Concourse. So here's the first. Here's the first photo of the Grand Concourse.
South from around 176th Street, and you can see the Empire State Building. Everybody wanted to be associated with the Bronx, so your mother may say, "I live right off the concourse," or "I live near the concourse," or "I have friends who live on the concourse." It was a status symbol, the concourse.
I have another one here of the Grand Concourse.
The Concourse Plaza is where the baseball Yankees, New York Yankees, and the New York Giants would stay during home games. I have a subscriber back in the Bronx who had a 3-bedroom apartment at the Concourse Plaza, and he said that 3-bedroom apartment was where Babe Ruth used to stay during home games.
Wow. I have another photo here. What is that?
Okay. Interesting. This is the last building on the western part of the Bronx, and in this building, there's Penny Marshall, Gary Marshall, and the family. And if you go across the street to the next picture is where Carl Reiner lived, right across the street from Gary Marshall and Penny Marshall, Bob Reiner and Rob Reiner afterwards. This is the last building on the eastern part of the concourse.
That's
and it's still a beautiful building.
amazing. That's amazing. So they were born next to one another right there. Look at
Right.
that.
And they asked, why didn't you meet one another? And people say, because back then it was dangerous to cross the concourse. And people, don't cross the concourse, it's too dangerous. So some people would go underneath the elevated, the underground train, and then come up so they didn't have to cross the concourse.
Crazy. I have another picture of the Grand Concourse. Now, these are all different pictures. This one here.
Right. This is a famous building. It's a mosaic nautical tiled building called the Fish Building, believe it or not. And in the late 1950s, early 60s, a lot of Jewish people moved into this building, and they changed the name from the Fish Building to the Gefilte Fish Building.
That's hilarious.
If you look at the next interior, you'll see the interior. This is typical of
Beautiful.
areas of all Bronx concourse building. There were one interior was nicer than the other, and this is around 166th Street and the concourse.
That reminds me of like Art Deco, Florida kind of stuff. Like
Right. There's more Art Deco buildings in the Bronx, residential buildings. People are paying rent in these buildings than anywhere in the United States. And the Art Deco building started up in the early 30s to the late 30s, similar to the Art Deco building in Miami Beach around the same time.
I love it.
Show another picture of the concourse. I'll give you some more information. This is 2008. How do I know? I think in 2009, the new Yankee Stadium opened, and you can see it hasn't opened yet. And this is a beautiful picture at night of 161st Street with the courthouse on the left, and apparently there's a night game at Yankee Stadium.
Beautiful. Unbelievably beautiful. Yeah. How do you get that shot? That's a beautiful shot, boy. Now, see, I didn't know about the Grand Concourse. I just heard, I mean, I've heard, but I didn't know all of this history of it. Are those buildings, by the way, all still there?
They're still there. It's still beautiful. When the Bronx was burning, not one building on the Bronx burned. So people realized how beautiful the buildings were, and they kept it that way. It was opened up in 1909, and it was like the Champs-Élysées of Paris there. They had elevated sections so that when you went to an elevated section, there was a transverse. So you would have a 161st Street transverse going underneath, 167th Street, 170th Street, Tremont Avenue, and Fordham Road, and so on and so forth. And the accessibility was good because you can get uptown in 10 or 15 minutes by train or by bus.
Fantastic. And now, what about other shopping areas in the Bronx, for the Bronxites in the 40s, 50s, and 60s? I have a couple of pictures here too. I assume that's what they are. This one here.
Yeah, this is a great picture of Fordham Road in 1947. You can see the RKO Fordham, and you can't quite see the Concourse movie theater right in front. But on that particular block, there were actually two pictures. And in 1948, that was the last year that trolleys ran in New York City. Uptown is Alexander's. This is where we did our shopping. Alexander's originally opened up on 30th Avenue, but it became our shopping in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and Ralph Lauren started working in Alexander's. And by the way, within about a 6-block radius of the Grand Concourse, at the tip of the Grand Concourse, there was Ralph Lauren, Klein, Robert Klein, Penny Marshall, Rob Reiner, Carl Reiner, and Gary Marshall there. It was just fabulous there. Robert Klein also.
Wow. And, you know, as I'm looking, I remember Alexander's as a kid. I remember there was, it must have been television commercials. I remember it's like, you know, school, my mom like, oh, we have to go to Alexander's and get you a new blue pants or whatever as a kid.
There was more money generated in Alexander's per square foot than any department store in the United States. That's how popular the Alexander's in the Bronx was on Fordham Road.
This is and this was in Brooklyn too. I remember these. I remember Alexander's. It was big.
I don't believe John. I don't believe Alexander's was in Brooklyn. You had A&S Strauss, but not Alexander's.
Yep. And maybe we went there because I remember this. Maybe it was the ads. I remember this. Alexander's was like a big department store when I was a kid. I mean, there was other things. There was Hush Puppy shoes and PF Flyers and all that.
I could be wrong.
I'd have to look it up.
Farkas was a subscriber to Back in the Bronx, so just like you to let you know that.
And there they go. And Calvin Klein too.
Calvin Klein, correct. That was the other Klein. Robert and Calvin Klein all live within a 6-block radius of the end of the concourse, which is interesting.
Charlie Fisher just asked, do you still live in the Bronx? I presume you do.
No, I live up in Westchester County.
Ah, okay. Yes, at KP. Let me bring up another one of these photos here. This is so I do remember Alexander's very well. I'm looking at them; they bring back memories to me. And Loman's.
Loman's where women shopped, and men sat, waiting for the women to try on clothing and asking for the opinion. This was on Fordham Road off of Jerome Avenue.
It's so cool just looking at that picture and seeing a phone booth. Look at the phone booth.
Right, yeah, I didn't recognize that. You're right.
It's just so funny to see the phone booth and those beautiful cars with the fins.
Right.
And the classic station wagon there. Wow. Yeah. Also here, I got a picture of Robert Hall.
This is just below Pope Park, diagonally across from Alexander's. Remember the jingle? When the values go up, 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 and the prices go down, down, down. Robert Hall this season will show you the reason. Low overhead, low overhead.
That's great. That's so great. Okay, here we got a picture of Saks.
This is Saks Quality Furniture on 150th Street over 3rd Avenue. Anybody remember the telephone number? You all do. Melrose 55300. Remember that?
Narrow. That's right.
That was everybody remembers that telephone number. It was ubiquitous. The advertisements for Saks Quality Furniture. You don't remember the store that it was related to, but you remember the jingle of the telephone number.
It's the way they put everything in our heads. Everything comes in our heads. Those jingles are great, and that it's just looking at, this is so the black and white picture that's so crispy like this. It reminds me of like when I watched the Twilight Zone movies, because the Twilight Zone movies, you see everything like the old black and white stuff, and it's like, and it's funny to think that you lived in a time when things weren't color, but yet we see it in color as people, and on television it was in black and white at the time. It's kind of weird. I look at this, it reminds me of, it's like a piece of history. It's a beautiful piece of history. I love the design, the way the circular, that 1960s kind of trying to be modern look kind of thing. It's beautiful. Right.
The original Alexander's, by the way, was about 2 blocks north on 3rd Avenue. I may have a picture of the original Alexander's as you scroll.
I don't think I have that here. I just have these ones. But another thing I noticed here, look at the architecture here of the buildings. If you look at the top above the windows are beautiful. And then above it, you have the designs in between each set of windows. It's like kind of, it's not
John,
like.
You notice the fire escape?
Yeah, the fire escape. And I also noticed the cobbled floor. Look at the way the stones are in the street.
Right. If you go up and down the concourse, by the way, you won't see any fire escapes. Does that mean that it didn't have a fire code the concourse at the rest of the Bronx? No, they did have fire escapes, but it was indented so you wouldn't see it. And that was the Art Deco. And also, we used to play basketball on the fire escape ladder. We would throw the ball between the rungs. And I remember taking my son to Yankee Stadium when he was 16, and I was pointing out the fire. I said, "That's where we played basketball." He said, "Basketball?" We would throw it through the rung, and he gave me a look like, "I can't believe you did something like that." He was incredulous that we could play basketball in this manner.
I'm looking at this picture too. I'm sorry to get so OCD on this picture, but I'm looking at it. It's so cool. And something else I don't think people think about anymore is if you look at the light post, it's a beautiful light post. It starts off really small. It's got rungs and it goes up and it comes around into a circle, and it comes around with a whole like little twister like 3 times around the top with a round bowl. It's actually attractive.
Like a refresh button that you were teaching me about before.
Yeah, but it's actually attractive. They don't make them like attractive anymore. They're just square. But back then, everything has a beautiful look to it. I don't know. I always tell people. I was having a conversation with somebody once, and the guy said to me, what would you like to do? I said, if I could time travel, I would like to go back to the 50s and see what it was like to be in that moment, because out of it came all these wonderful movies and all these great shows. You had, Father Knows Best, and everything was kind of like, it seemed wholesome and American and Americana and conservative, and and their families seem, even though that's what they portrayed. And then the guy said to me, who I was speaking to, he said, well, you could go back to that, African Americans was sitting on the back of the bus. There was heavy racism. I said, you know something, that's the one thing that I think that I wouldn't agree with, of course, but to see a time where people believed in a better value, I would like to live in, even though that value was missing.
It wasn't racist, but we didn't think it was racist. We thought the racism was in the deep South. But you go to Shore Haven Beach Club, 20,000 people, you didn't see any blacks. Metropolitan Light, Parkchester, until the mid '60s, no blacks were allowed there. So
Really?
it was, but we never felt. We thought we were, cosmopolitan, but we weren't. In fact.
Yeah, and we said, but well, look, it was the mentality of a time, and things started to change. But I will say that I would love to be transported into 1950 and walk around the streets and go have an eclair and see women wearing dresses and hats and men wearing hats and jackets and ties. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not knocking people today. I'm just making the point that I think if it seems like a better time, with the exception of the racism, it seemed like a better time. Then again, there was fears about being bombed and shelters. I remember the yellow round sign with the shelters that you go into a building if there was a bomb.
You go under the desk in case of a nuclear explosion, like the desk is going to protect you. But we all believe the desk would protect us from it.
Right, which is ridiculous. But it's so different.
Had a great joke about that. Yeah.
But we have fears today too. We have plenty of fears today, and it's almost the same. Not that fear hasn't changed. What's changed is what the object of destruction will be, but the fear is still there. Now, here's the best part, the part that I like to talk the most about right now with you, because this I'm looking forward to: eating out in the Bronx and food shopping. Now, I'm a big guy. Like, I love food has been my hobby, and I was looking at some of the photos that you have here. Here's the first one up. I love this.
Yeah, on Sundays in Jewish areas, that was the appetizer. So you get your lots, bagels, whitefish sturgeon, and it was there. It was all over Jewish areas. And Sunday mornings, people went out for bagels, and that brought back all the appetizing that was associated with bagels.
Was Shaq's considered Jewish?
Yes. If it was an appetizing store, chances are it was Jewish.
But look, Steve, it says here, if you look at the photo on the right thing, it says lobster 49 cents a pound, which, by the way, is very inexpensive. Lobster was, I don't think
right.
Jewish people ate lobster.
I would think $25 a pound. You're right. I didn't even notice that.
It says, lobster 49 cents a pound. And I mean, I could obviously in that it says herring something free, nut chopped fried fruit, candies, halal, and free shopping bags. They were giving away a shopping bag if you came in to buy, I guess, the food. I don't know. I just look at this and it just makes me want to transport myself to a time when I could see that. That's just really cool. Here's another photo here.
Right. There were a number of bakeries in the Bronx. Chef on Marshall Loop Parkway was one. And we'll scroll through some more and I'll tell you where they were located.
Okay. Here comes the
then there were restaurants like Mario's. Mario's is in Belmont, still great Italian restaurant. The fifth generation, and unfortunately, Michael, the owner of Mario's, passed away 2 months ago from COVID. And you'll see another picture of Michael inside the restaurant. And next one with the champ. No, he's not there. Okay. Bedonio's is a 100-year-old bakery in Belmont, still there. Great pastries.
Really? And it says since 1918. I mean, I want to go to the pizzeria and I want to go to the pastry shop.
Well, more, yeah.
And the next one here is
Zaro's. Bad news and good news. Bad news: after 70 years, Zaro's closed. Within a year of its closing, it reopened a store away, and Zaro's is still in Parkchester. And this was taken in Parkchester.
Wow. It's a shame to hear that the pizzeria guy died from COVID. Wow, that's horrible.
Yeah.
So what about special Bronx ice cream treats?
Right.
Now
here's a story. Yeah.
Let's see. And by the way, I have. In fact, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I noticed also that there's some. Those are the bakeries that we just went through. I have a couple other pictures here that I wanted to bring up.
Okay. All right. So,
yeah.
to give you an idea, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kosher delicatessens in the Bronx. On one block on Lighting Avenue, just off of White Plains Road, there were actually 4 kosher delis on one block. This is the only kosher deli left in the Bronx. Liebman's, 235th Street in Riverdale. The rest are gone. Kosher deli. This was a kosher deli in the Bronx. Epstein's. Mrs. Epstein was a former subscriber back in the Bronx, and it's still up in Westchester. A couple of kosher Epstein delis are there in Westchester County.
And what is this? There's a photo here of famous Bronx.
Yes, this is Car 54 was of course, a television show shot in the Bronx. And if you look to your right, behind Muldoon, you see Chefs, and you can see it in color. And just to the left was Schweller's delicatessen, right near Chef's Bakery. And Mrs. Schweller was a subscriber, told me when she sold her deli in the 80s, it was the largest sale of a delicatessen in New York City history. So gives you an idea how big that deli was.
Wow. And you know, it's how did you compile this? Just from memory? Or you started writing it all down?
7 years, you'll learn a lot there from people sending in stories and such. Okay,
now special Bronx ice cream treats. Yum yum.
Okay, Jan's here's a story. I'll tell you quick. Papa Jan's apparently had 4 sons and gave each of them an ice cream parlor in different boroughs except Manhattan. And so there is one ice cream store left in Queens, Jan's. But in 1958, I have a menu from Jan's. The kitchen sink, which was a big bunch of ice cream, was $6.15. Today, a kitchen sink in Jan's in Queens is almost $50. In 1958, you can actually buy an actual kitchen sink for $50. Today, all you get is ice cream.
You know, I don't know if I hate to tell you this, but when I was a kid, there was a Jan's in Brooklyn on 86th Street under the L, underneath the train station, 86th Street and maybe 20th, 18th, 19th Avenue underneath. They called it the L because of the train station that went there. It was all the places where people, when you got your license, you would drive down and try to pick up girls under the L when you were a kid. But
special place, you only bring really girls that you wanted to show off because it was expensive. But this is a show. It was like show and tell, basically.
But I remember as a kid, my mom saying, "Hey, what do you want for your birthday?" And we want to go to Jan's, and we would have the kitchen sink. And I do remember, by the way, now it's COVID times; it's such a different time. But I remember as a kid, they would bring out that huge bowl of ice cream, and it had 100 different flavors and all kinds of junk all over it. And everybody would just stick their spoons in there and eat it. It was like nobody was serving any kind of flavor. We were all like animals eating out of this big bowl of stuff. I mean, you think about how unsanitary that is today. But Jan's on 86th Street closed, I guess.
Remember sharing Pepsi, a 16-ounce bottle of Pepsi? Everybody would pass it around, and nobody ever got sick. Nobody hit their head falling off a bicycle because there were no helmets back then. I got
fond memories of Jan's. And here's another picture here, too. What is this?
The interior of Bronx Jan's.
The one in the Bronx is gone? It's gone, Steve?
Crumbs is also there. You've got a great picture of Crumbs coming up if you have it. But this is the actual contemporary kitchen sink that we were alluding to before.
I could go for that right now.
This was plastic.
How about there's Crumbs?
Looking north, you can see Crumbs there. The Wagner building at the corner. And Crumbs had 2 entrances, one on the concourse, the other one on 188th Street.
Was it a better time, Steve, then than it is now?
You asked 99.9% of the Bronxites, did they enjoy their time there? And they would say yes. But we're looking at it through, rose-colored glasses. It was good. It was great. But it wasn't as good as we are making it out to be. But it was wonderful.
And do you think the internet has made things better or worse for our world? Both.
I don't know. It's a good question.
It's hard to say.
It didn't have any effect. All I can say is the Bronx looks nicer now than it looked in the 40s and 50s. The new buildings coming up, we remember it as kids. Oh, it looked really nice, but we can only remember it from kids' eyes. As adults, we can now take in the entire spectrum of how it looked. And in the 40s, it looked like a bombed-out London. The streets were horrible. Really? We didn't see it. We didn't know what London was in the 40s.
Right. And by the way, when you look through the eyes of a child, everything is the way it's supposed to be. I mean, you don't judge it as right or wrong. It is what it is. You know, it's like having a little baby kitten. It just comes into the world and doesn't think it's right if it's raining or snowing. It just lives its life as we did
Right.
as kids. You know, I have one other picture here from there. That's
Oh, this is a great picture. This is by Yankee Stadium, 161st Street. It had the Roxy Deli, which was a kosher deli on the corner of Girard Avenue. And if you look all the way to the left, Nedick's was on right off of, at that point, it's River Avenue. And diagonally across, it was the old Yankee Stadium. And straight across now is the new Yankee Stadium. But Nedick's is not there anymore. McDonald's took over the area.
now I remember Nedick's.
Addie Valens, right? Another ice cream parlor right in the middle of that block. If you could just go back for a second, look to the left of Roxy, and you can see, if you look closely, Addie Valens.
Wow.
Right, 2 doors to the left of Roxy.
And I do remember Nedick's. There was one in Manhattan on like 42nd Street and Broadway.
Yes.
And they were used to, and there was Orange Julius. And I just, they were wonderful. And also I remember Wetson's was another big burger thing before.
And also, Date Nut Bread, what was that?
Big W.
Doris Duke, the owner, the cigarette owner, chock full of nuts was another chain. With the Date Nut Bread, it was wonderful.
You know, I just funny because I just bought K cups for chock full of nuts. And
Right.
I'm saying to my wife as I brought it in, do you remember the commercial for this? Chock full of nuts is the heavenly coffee for a millionaire's money can't buy. And I got this in my head. I'm like, oh God, I remember seeing that black and white commercial over and over and over. They had all different stars on it. And I have the coffee upstairs now. It's still good today. Chock full of nuts. I like it. And not that I'm.
30 years old.
That should be my sponsor. Chock full of nuts. Something that's old that's still new that everyone can enjoy. So moving right along here, let's talk about the movie theaters of the time. I got the first picture up here of the Lowe's Paradise.
Yes, this is our go-to movie. The Lowe's Paradise Theater opened in 1929. Had air conditioning, handicapped seating, which was and an elevator. You know, but the air conditioning and the handicapped seating was kind of unique for that period of time. It started like vaudeville and then became a theater back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and it's now the Crevlo Church. It's still magnificent inside. And you'll see some pictures as you scroll. Magnificent now. You can see it. Much nicer than Radio City could ever be.
Wow.
This is the great lobby, the steps leading up to the mezzanine.
Unbelievable.
The 4,000-seat balcony. Robert Klein says that you take the girls up to the balcony. There's more DNA on the seats of the balcony Paradise Theater than all of CSI Miami.
They were crispy seats.
The stars moving, the clouds moving. It was a romantic effect for sure.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It was supposed to be an outdoor 16th century Mediterranean garden, and you can see the scenery, the grass, the trees and such.
But this is my point about everything. Everything seemed to be done in a grandiose, beautiful way compared to today. It was grandiose. Everything was over the top. There was an artist eye involved in everything that was taking place. Even if it was rudimentary to today's standards, it was more beautiful than some of today's things. It's just amazing. And also Orchard Beach. I have a couple pictures here of Orchard Beach. There you go.
Orchard Beach was our Bronx Riviera. It had 5,000 to 10,000 locker rooms. And it looks kind of like this now, a little shop worn, but this was our place. If you had a car, of course, you could drive there, but most people or many people didn't have it. So it takes you an extra token to get from the train or the bus to the Orchard Beach bus to get there. But it was certainly worth it. And sometimes it could take as long as an hour from the West Bronx to get to Orchard Beach.
Wow. And there's the beach.
Now, this is our beach, and you would go to your section. If you were Jewish, you would go to, let's say, section 10. If you were Italian, 9. If you're Irish, 11. And you went there because you felt comfortable. You can never do that today because it wouldn't be politically correct to allow certain ethnicities to be in a certain area. They would want you to mingle. But back then, there were no fights. We just were there, happy to be around people that we were comfortable with.
So you had your own section at the beach.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, they didn't call it the Jewish section. You just knew that if, let's say it was section 10, you were Jewish, you went to section 10. If you were Irish and maybe gone to 11. And somehow I remember, and I could be wrong, the Puerto Rican section was on the other end, like section 5. And nobody ever complained. The 9, 10, and 11 were closer to the cafeteria and the food. And that was the most convenient place to be. But if you were in 5, you were in no man's land, and it was secluded. And for other people, they liked that. But it didn't have a boardwalk like Evan Coney Island that you remember. You go underneath the boardwalk, sure, and it was cool underneath there. We didn't have that. Our boardwalk was not board, and it was pavement, and there was no underneath. The sand was underneath, and nothing between the boardwalk and the sand.
I remember it was always cooler underneath the boardwalk on your feet than outside. How about the Bronx Zoo?
The Bronx Zoo was responsible for keeping the American bison. In early 1920s or so, there were only 14 American bisons left, and it was bred in the Bronx Zoo and then shipped out to the Midwest. So we now have the American bison because of the Bronx Zoo. The Bronx Zoo had 5 entrances: Fordham Road, Southern Boulevard, Boston Road, 180th Street, and people would gather around the sea lion and feeding, which was a very popular attraction back in the 40s and 50s and 60s.
Wow. Another done beautifully thing in the Bronx Zoo. Now, how is it compared to today? I mean, I know they still
back then it was basically free. Anybody can get in at any time. Then they changed it that it was free on certain days and not other days. And now, of course, for a family of 4, well over $100 to get into the zoo, just admission to the zoo. The things have changed, but it's still wonderful, the zoo. And some subscribers who live near the zoo can actually hear from their apartment building lions roaring when food was being dispersed for dinner time. Could you believe living in the Bronx, hearing a lion in your living room?
Well, my wife hears it when I go to sleep every night. Also, I see Kings Bridge. Here you go, Kings Bridge.
Armory comprised it with one large block, 5 acres. Believe it or not, it's now going to be a ice skating facility. It's going to have, I think, 9 ice skating rinks, regulation rinks, a 5,000 arena for people to watch, and it's going to employ 1,000 Bronxites. And this is where I believe James Bathgate had his estate. So
really?
The James Bathgate estate was actually knocked down to build the Kingsbridge Armory. And he also owned, not too far, maybe 3 or 4 blocks away, Jerome Park Raceway, which became the Bellman Park. So the original Bellman Park racetrack was originally in the Bronx from 1867 to 1891, and then it became the Jerome Park Reservoir, which is still there today.
And also, Steve, I see here, I have pictures here of the Botanical Garden. How large is the Botanical Garden? When did this open?
250 acres. It's still magnificent. A lot of upscale weddings are held at the conservatory there, and it's beautiful. It's still beautiful, and you can get special deals that includes parking for $99, which we have, and you can park for free for 15 times. So, and parking across the street, if parking is difficult, Fordham University is right across the street, and it's 2 or 3 blocks away from the Bronx Zoo and 3 or 4 blocks away from the Italian section of the Bronx. So you're in a great area once you're in the Botanical Garden. You're right by everything.
Speaking of great areas, what areas is there areas now that are tougher? Because now I used to work a lot in the Bronx over the last decade or two doing events for Latino clubs that were strictly Latino. And are there areas today that are more difficult of an area compared to back then? I mean, what's changed?
The Latino, the Puerto Ricans moved into the South Bronx. It was called the South Bronx. Tito Puente had his band there, and that's where a lot of salsa, mambo, and they had a Hunts Point Palace, which was on Southern Boulevard, and they would have Latin bands playing there. And also American bands. Swing was popular in the 40s and 50s there, and people would remember, old timers especially, remember dancing at the Hunts Point Palace.
I used to work a club on Blondell Avenue in the Bronx, and it's a Latino club, And I got to tell you, the Latino community are the best comedy fans ever. They are really, they're rocking crowds. It's a lot of fun to work. Really a lot of fun. Now, what about Yankee Stadium? Yankee Stadium, when was this built? I have a picture here of Yankee Stadium.
It was built in 1923 on River Avenue between 153rd and 161st Street. This looks like the mid 50s. It may be a World Series game. You can see the car with the hood convertible there. This was a place where we went. If you didn't have too much money, as I didn't have, I would go Saturdays, walk 15 or 20 blocks from my house and schnorr tickets, ask for tickets. And invariably, I would get people to come up to me and say, I have a ticket, and it would be a boxy ticket. And sometimes they would have ice cream and frankfurters for me. And I was treated like a king, and I got into every game. I even got into a World Series a couple of times doing that. So if you were industrious, as I was, you could get in. And I was a vendor as well. So I knew Yankee Stadium from 1958 to mid 1960s, and my son Michael, who you saw before, my other son Mark, were both vendors there. And when they were vending in the late 90s, and the Yankees were winning all of the World Series games, and they were celebrating on River Avenue, they said, "Daddy, you can't believe what happened." I said, "What do you mean I can't believe? I lived through this every year. It was either the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Giants playing. So what they were living was the way I lived in the 40s, well, in the 50s and 60s."
And everyone whined about the Mets too. And when did the old one close and the new one open?
The old one closed in 2008 and opened the new one 2009. And this is the 50th anniversary of the old Yankee Stadium in 1973.
Wow! And then I have an overhead shot.
Right. So you could see, if you look to your right, there were buildings, let's say on the 2 o'clock, if you had a clock there, you could see buildings overhead. People would go up to the building and stare over the building and watch games. And in the upper left-hand corner, the Coombs Dam Park, and that's where the new Yankee Stadium is now.
That's hilarious. People would actually go over the buildings and watch the games. Now, you can't talk about the Bronx without mentioning City Island. Now, I have a picture of City Island.
Right. City Island is a nautical island that looked like, Massachusetts. It looks nothing like the Bronx. It's one long mile with 4 or 5 blocks to the side. And you need a special bus going to take you there. But it's very, very popular on summer weekends now. Very, very crowded. And prices of homes are skyrocketing there because it's a pretty safe neighborhood.
But does it belong to the Bronx, City Island? Is it part of the?
It belongs to the Bronx, and there are yacht clubs up and down City Island Avenue there. This is the trolley in the 40s running there, and you can see some yacht clubs, maybe the next picture or two. I don't know. And the City Island, the Lobster House is still around. The Black Whale that you may remember from the 50s and 60s that served ice cream treats. It wasn't a restaurant. Today it's a restaurant. It's still there. Probably been there since the 60s.
So City Island. Now, what attracted the Bronxites to travel there? Was it because of the water, the fish, and what was?
Well, it was because it was cooler. It was near Orchard Beach, so you could go swimming and take a bus, or if you wanted, you could even walk to City Island there. And they had fish dinners. People remember if they had a car, Sunday night they would all go up in the car to City Island, to the lobster box for their lobsters and other seafood. So it was very, very popular.
And Bob Grant's asking, let's talk about the Bronx movies, Marty, with Ernest Borgnine is my favorite.
Right. The Chester Theater off of West Farms was the movie that Ernest Borgnine, who played the butcher on the Academy Award-winning 1955 movie Marty. And that movie, the Chester, was where they would go. And the Stardust Ballroom, I believe, was the ballroom that they also alluded to in the picture. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Hey, before we end it, we're already at almost 1 hour already. And I didn't even play a clip of your demo, which I maybe add on to the end here. But before we even end, I thought I'd like to introduce a friend who wrote a book on laughter, which you and Steve and I are both in. And this book is actually fantastic. I have a copy of it here. There's a DVD as well. But we're both inside this book. Let me bring this up on the screen really quick here. Here you go. There it is. A smile, a grin, a laugh, that's life. And this is written by John Galasso and his beautiful daughter as well, which I could actually show you guys a quick picture of as well. Victoria Galasso. And Victoria Galasso was an undergraduate career at Boston College and a degree in sociology and education. And John was raised in the Bronx, New York. He's almost like, when you think about the Bronx, I always think about John. So I like to bring him on here as well. And I know you know him very well, Steve. Here he is, the guy who likes to tell about how comedy is healing to people. It's John Galasso. There you go. Hey, John.
Hey, guys.
How are you?
I got to tell you, wow, talking about the Bronx, what a great interview and presentation. It brought back so many memories. Like, it's just so wonderful hearing about this. I mean, it was really, really nice. And you know, Steve, I got to tell you, after you talking about the Bronx, we were considering moving because we still live in the Bronx. And now that I found out, you know, more about this borough, Vicky and I are going to stay. We're not leaving.
Around 149th Street, the hub. That's where the shopping was started. It was before the Alexander Fordham Road. The hub was where the 30th Avenue L and 149th Street came, and everybody did their shopping there in the 40s and 50s, and then uptown Alexander became popular. But you lived there. Not that many people these days came from your neck of the woods.
Well, yeah, actually, I lived exactly on East 148th Street. That's where I grew up. And I mean, I lived there for many, many years. And, you know, today I'm still in the Bronx. I'm in the North Bronx, but I spent my whole life in the Bronx. And like just hearing about it and the stories and the memories, it's like, it's incredible. It's like, it's just, it was a wonderful place to grow up in. And, you know, hearing John talk about, like, you know, how.
Oh, I think John froze up on us.
Right.
Hey, John, refresh your browser. I think you know. He's back.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. The Bronx will always have a special place in my heart because I don't know. I feel like that, you know, maybe I shouldn't say, but I feel like we grew up special. It was just so everybody was great. It was just such a great upbringing.
It was.
And you know, and John, I wasn't able to show, but here's the co-author of his book.
The Bronx. My daughter Victoria is a public school teacher in the Bronx. I mean, we got our roots, our family is still here.
Here she is. That's your lovely daughter, Victoria.
Beautiful.
Right there. I just put it right over your face.
You know, I didn't see the pictures. I can't see the pictures
right there.
For some reason.
That's Victoria Galasso.
Can you see it, Steve? I can't see it.
Doesn't matter. You see her every day or every other day. I get to see her, you know, once in a while, and that's good. You don't need to see her.
Yeah, John. You know, I couldn't see the pictures as you were posting them. I don't know.
That's quite all right. Yeah, I just wanted to show it up. I just wanted to give her credit too, because I know she wrote that book with you. A lot of people don't know, but this book is about actually the healing effects of laughter, showing how good. John, tell us about the book real briefly. Tell us.
That's right. And I just wanted to say, I mean, obviously, which we all know, today we're living in such, you know, tough times. I mean, today we're in a place now where we've never been, at least in my lifetime and you guys' lifetime. And like there's a need for more positive things. And Victoria and I wrote this book on the healing effects of laughter. And it kind of, it shows that, you know, there's a lot of things like what's going on in the world today we can't do anything about, but what we could do is it's how we react to them. And laughter is a subject that just brings everybody together. It's healing, it's universal. And it's just, I mean, you guys are both in the book and gave wonderful interviews. You know, John, I know you're a believer in the healing of, I mean, obviously, you're a great entertainer. I mean, you've traveled all around the country performing, and you've told me countless times how you believe in the healing effects of laughter. Basically, just what happens to the mind and body when you laugh. And I know Steve, too. I mean, we've talked, you know, so many times. And, you know, you're a firm believer, too. You said, you know, that laughter is healing. It's just, it's all good. And I know you guys believe in that. And in this book, we also, everybody that we mentioned this to kind of like loved the concept, and they just agreed to jump on board. And
Who are some of the people, John? Who are some of the people in that book?
mean, we interviewed everybody from celebrities to people of every walks of life. We interviewed a lot of comedians. Obviously, John, start with yourself. We interviewed Uncle Floyd, Jackie Martlin, Pat Cooper wrote the foreword to the book. We interviewed Lance Burton, who's not a comedian, but he does comedy in his act in Las Vegas. We interviewed Steve from back in the Bronx, who's a firm believer. His wonderful wife, Susan. We interviewed religious leaders. Pastor Joel Osteen, who he usually don't give interviews to little guys like me, but he loved the idea and he granted us an interview. We interviewed his brother-in-law, Don, just a great, great guy. We interviewed doctors, Dr. Judy, Dr. Lisa, psychologists. The list is endless. And everybody, basically the bottom line is everybody shared with us how laughter played a pivotal role in their life and in their work. And
John, I don't think people know it too, but after you spent so much time writing that book, later on you decided to make it more like a DVD video, and I have it here. We have this video here.
Just Laugh. And actually, it's on the same subject, and we actually did that DVD first. The DVD came out before the book, but it was on the same subject, on the healing effects of laughter. And it's just like everybody who hears about it, just thinking our response has been really, really good. And like now in these terrible, terrible times, we're just trying to do our best to get the message out there that there's another way to look at things, and basically better days are coming. And
I agree.
That's the message that we're trying to put forth.
And where can we get that from? I know where we could get that. The DVD, you could actually
tell us, where can we get it?
You can get it at justlaugh.org.
Now, where is that, John? I don't know. My hearing is going. I really didn't hear. Where can we get it?
Justlaugh.org is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
If you want the DVD, which, by the way, this DVD, I've watched it a couple of times. It's really great. It really does have an informative display of people explaining how laughter actually does heal people's lives. And in the times that we're in right now, laughter is in short order. It really does need to be more. As a matter of fact, between the political correctnesses and people trying to reverse history and all the things that are going on in our world, laughter is a commodity that needs to be exposed even more than ever. We have to learn to laugh at ourselves, kind of, in order to accept things the way they are. And John, you've got that in this book and in this DVD, actually.
Which is great. And Steve also, I mean, he was, Steve gave a great, great interview. And Steve is another believer in laughter. I mean, he just believes in the message. So, doing a Bronx show tonight and talking about laughter, I mean, what could be better? It's just,
I totally agree. And Steve,
it's all good.
Where do we get to see Steve? Now, Steve being the man of the Bronx, you could get him at backinthebronx.com, correct, Steve?
Right. On the Facebook page, Back in the Bronx. You go see some videos on YouTube. And I said the 2-disc DVD that we sell for $29.95. If you go on YouTube, you can watch it for free. So there's a lot of good information there. And if you have friends who came from the Bronx or even Brooklyn, I get a lot of Brooklynites, maybe 10 to 20% of the people coming to my seminar from Brooklyn, and they enjoy it. And even out-of-towners enjoy the seminars, and especially people who marry Bronxites who may have come from Ohio. They now understand through the PowerPoint presentation and this presentation what makes Bronxites tick, because we're special people. Just like Brooklyn people are special people in a similar way. And it's nice to see somebody from the Midwest realizing that their husband has gone through life in this manner and maybe connecting why they are the way they are now.
I got to make one other point about the Bronx, which everywhere you go, no matter where you go, it seems like somebody has their roots go back to the Bronx. You could go anywhere in the country, and if you mention the Bronx and you go, "Oh, I'm from the Bronx," they go, "Oh, yeah, yeah, you know, my cousin, my uncle." There seems to be always a history traced back to the Bronx. And I'll just tell you briefly, 3 years ago, I was in Italy, and people were talking, "Where are you from?" And I said, "The Bronx." And they were saying, "Oh, the Bronx, you know, my godfather, my uncle, my cousin." There's always something always goes back there.
All the boroughs in New York are like that. I agree with you too. And by the way, and Steve too, on you could also get you here too, right? Back in the Bronx phone number is here.
Right.
And the email is info@backinthebronx.com. If somebody would like to contact you about perhaps doing a seminar online at a library or any event,
Perfect. Yes.
that'd be great. And John, they can get you at justlaugh.org.
Yep, and the book is also available on Amazon, but it would be much easier if you just go to justlaugh.org.
Well, you'll sign it if they come to you directly, won't?
Absolutely. And John, where was that again? I don't know. My hearing is off today.
You mean justlaugh.org?
Oh yeah, that was it. Okay, I got it.
He's turning into never mind about humor. He's turning into a salesman. You know, one of the things I always remember about the Bronx, I remember he was like, what does a welcome mat say in the Bronx when you go look at a welcome mat in front of someone's door? It says, "What the hell are you looking at?"
Some of the people all of the time, some of the time, but you can't Con Edison.
And
you
John,
can't Edison.
John, I got one more thing.
Con Edison in Brooklyn. Did you, John?
Yeah, we had Con Edison. Yes, we had Con Edison.
John, I got to say one more thing. I mean, we talked a lot about Steve. We talked a lot about me, but you got to say a little bit about you. It's only right. I mean, you know, where you are, and you're all over the place, and you're all over the country, and people need to see you. You're the funniest comedian.
Where am I? I'm here underneath the stairs in a green screen room, sitting on my testicles.
Where can people find you?
You can find me right here, johnpeasy.com or jpzent.com. And you guys are both a pleasure. And, you know, I would have put this up on YouTube and stuff. I'm sorry we couldn't take more comments. I was trying to keep this under an hour, and it's already like an hour and 10. Just for the heck of it, on the way out of here, I'm going to play a video that I think will end us off really well. If you guys will sit back and watch this is really cool. There's another comment. Steve and I were both at Clinton 61. Met Steve at the 50th reunion. Art Cooper, you know him?
I don't know, but as you're playing it, I'm going to take out my book that's over here. I have a 61 Clinton book. I'll look for Art Cooper.
You look him up. As a matter of fact, he's at your door right now, and he's telling you that your wife is like trying to take your wife out of it. So I'm gonna leave us on the way out of here. Thank you guys in the chat for coming along. I wish I could have gotten to more of you, but we'll probably end up doing this again. But in the interim, I'd like to
thank you very much.
No, my pleasure, John Galasso, and thank you, Steve, for your informative.
Thank you. Informative. Really enjoyed it.
You know your stuff without you know.
Thanks, Steve, too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Cooper, I'm looking for Cooper here. Cooper. Okay, hold on one second. Cooper. Cooper, yes, I remember. CCNY Library Squad, Table Tennis Club, Honor School, Honor. See what I was telling you?
See that?
Honor Club, Math Office, and Squad Sound Technician. He could have helped us today if we needed technical.
On the way out, you got Cooper. Look at that. Hey, we're gonna end this off. Thank you guys. Thank you, John Galasso, and thank you, Steve. And you guys know where to get us from. And I like this to end off showing you guys this. Very cool. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.
On the streets is where I wanna be. Standing on the corner singing good old harmony. my friends made it come alive, playing stickball in the street and watching cars go by. Oh my Lord, the Bronx has been good to me. On the streets is where I wanna be. Standing on a corner singing good old harmony. The streets of the Bronx have sure been good to me. Summers went fast and the winters went slow. Going back to school, we headed to go. Oh my Lord, the Bronx has been good to me. Oh my Lord, the Bronx has been good to me. On the streets of the Bronx, on the streets of the Bronx, the streets of the Bronx have sure been good to me. Oh yeah, on the streets is where I wanna be, with all my friends living in harmony. The streets of the Bronx